When the first frost of winter kissed the earth, the old man knew it was more than a season changing, it was a test of survival. The winds whispered of a storm unlike any the tribe had known. Before we begin, share where you're watching from, and if you're moved by the strength of our ancestors, subscribe, because tomorrow's legend runs even deeper. The first frost had come with a quiet whisper across the plains. The trees stood stiff, their limbs trembling under the weight of the changing air. It was a cold that seeped through the bones, deeper than any ordinary chill, and the old man felt it in his very soul. To him, the seasons were more than mere time markers, they were living beings, ancient spirits that spoke in winds and shadows. As a child, he had learned to listen to the land, to understand its signs long before they touched the people. He had learned the hard way, as all the elders did, to know when a storm would bear down with the force of an old spirit's wrath. He watched the children play in the cold, their breath rising in soft clouds as they ran through the falling leaves. They did not know yet, as he did, that this autumn would be unlike any other. His tribe had always been resilient, built on the wisdom of many winters past, but this one would demand more. He could feel it in the way the wind pushed against him as he stood by the river. It was not the steady gusts that he had known. No, this wind carried something else, a weight, a reminder of a deeper cold that had come long before the tribe had walked this land. The fire pit crackled in the distance, but the old man didn't join the others yet. He paced slowly, his feet pressing into the earth, his senses reaching out to the land in a prayerful rhythm. This place, this valley they called home, had been kind to them. The hills rose around them like the arms of a mother, protective and steady. But the old man knew, even before the frost had fully settled, that it would not be enough. The cabins, the homes they had built for generations, would not survive the coming storm. This was no ordinary winter. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of red and purple, the old man had made his decision. He walked toward the outskirts of the village, where the snow-dusted peaks loomed in the distance, their white tops already heavy with the promise of snow. There, hidden from the sight of the younger ones, he began his work. It would take days, but there was no time to waste. His tribe needed a refuge, something beyond what the land had already given them, a shelter that would not freeze, that would not falter under the weight of nature's fury. The young ones were quick to dismiss his quiet movements. They were distracted by the evening meals, by the stories of ancestors that were shared in the glow of the fire. The elders' actions would not be understood until the storm was upon them, and by then it would be too late. But the old man, grounded in the wisdom of his forefathers, worked with quiet certainty. For he knew that the snow would come, and with it, a test of everything they had ever believed about survival. The first flakes began to fall as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting the world into twilight. At first, they were light, delicate, like the soft breath of the earth itself, but they came faster, thicker, until the sky was a blanket of white. The air grew colder with each passing minute, and the wind began to howl through the valley, making the trees bend low under its force. The tribe had prepared, as they always did, but the old man's warning echoed in their minds now, sharper than the biting wind. This storm was unlike any they had faced before. The cabins were warm, built from thick logs and tightly chinked to keep the cold at bay. Yet the old man's words hung over them, "It is not enough." As the snow fell in heavier sheets, the fire in each cabin crackled, but seemed unable to hold back the cold. The wind found every small crack, every opening in the walls, and with it came the biting chill that numbed the bones. Inside the cabins, the families huddled together, pulling blankets tighter around them, feeling the frost creep through the walls and into their hearts. The storm was relentless, and by the time night fell, the snow had begun to accumulate in deep drifts. It piled high against the doors, making the cabins impossible to open. The tribe's firewood, stacked high for the winter, was now buried under snow, and the deep freeze had set in faster than anyone had anticipated. The young ones, too used to the warmth of their homes, began to cry, their fear growing as the cold crept in. The elders, too, felt the weight of uncertainty settle over them. The old man had warned them, but now they could do nothing but wait, trapped within the very shelter they had relied on for generations. It was in this moment of stillness, as the tribe fought to stay, warm and calm their children, that the old man stood up. His bones ached from the work he had done earlier in the day, but his mind was sharp. He could hear the wind howling outside, but his thoughts were steady. He had prepared for this. They would survive. They had to. With a quiet strength, the old man turned toward the village center. The snow was thick, the drifts high, but there was no time to waste. He moved with purpose, his boots crunching through the deep snow, his eyes fixed on the distant hill where he had hidden his secret shelter. He did not look back at the frozen cabins, for he knew there was no hope left in them now. His tribe's only chance lay with the snow chamber he had built. The young ones would not understand why he had worked in secret, why he had chosen to build a shelter outside the village. But soon they would see. As he reached the site, he took a deep breath and glanced up at the mountains, his heart filling with a quiet gratitude for the land that had given him the knowledge to survive. He opened the hidden entrance, and the warmth from within immediately began to push against the cold. One by one, the villagers would come to him, guided by the old man's steady hand. This was their only refuge. And as the storm raged on, they would come to understand the power of foresight, of listening to the land, and of trusting in the wisdom of the past. The snow chamber was unlike any shelter the tribe had ever seen. Hidden deep within a ridge, it was a sanctuary built not just with the hands, but with the spirit of the land itself. The entrance, barely noticeable beneath the thick layer of snow and rock, had been carved with care, following the natural lines of the earth. As the old man led his tribe inside, the warmth hit them like a comforting embrace. It was a warmth that seemed to seep into their very souls, a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. One by one, the families filed into the chamber, their eyes wide with wonder, relief. The interior was spacious enough to hold the entire tribe, though it was humble in design. The walls, naturally formed by rock, were reinforced with stone carefully stacked by the old man's hands, a testament to the wisdom of his ancestors. Above, the ceiling arched with the same stone, smooth and rounded, giving the space a feeling of protection as though the mountain itself had wrapped its arms around them. The warmth in the chamber was a result of more than just the fire that now crackled in the hearth. The old man had understood the land's secret. The earth itself radiated heat from deep within, and he had designed the shelter to capture and hold it. As snow piled higher outside, the cold had no chance of reaching them. It was not just a refuge, it was a place of survival. The tribe had always depended on their homes to keep them warm, but now they understood the difference between mere shelter and true protection. The fire at the center was a small comfort, its warmth amplified by the way the chamber was built to conserve heat. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wood, the firewood crackling gently as it burned. The flickering light cast shadows on the stone walls, and the sounds of the storm outside felt distant, almost like a memory. The tribe settled into the chamber, their fears slowly replaced by the quiet sense of safety that the old man had promised. The children huddled together by the fire, comforted by the heat, while the elders exchanged looks of quiet gratitude. They had not yet fully understood the magnitude of the old man's work, but as the cold outside grew fiercer, they began to see the wisdom in his secret construction. The old man moved quietly around the chamber, checking on the fire and ensuring that the stone vents were unobstructed. He had built the shelter with foresight, knowing that the fire's smoke needed to escape without revealing their position to the outside world. The chamber was a place of refuge, but it was also hidden, a sanctuary that would shield them not only from the storm, but from anything else the land or their enemies might throw their way. Outside, the wind howled louder than ever, but inside, there was only peace. Days passed, but the storm showed no signs of easing. The howling wind outside became a constant, a relentless force that threatened to tear apart everything in its path. Yet inside the snow chamber, the tribe remained sheltered, their spirits lifting with each passing hour. The fire burned steadily, its warmth wrapping the people in comfort, while the old man kept watch over the tribe with quiet vigilance. The children, once terrified by the storm, had grown accustomed to the steady rhythm of life in the chamber. They played games in the warmth, their laughter filling the space. The elders, too, found solace in the safety of their refuge, though their minds were heavy with worry. The storm, though fierce, had already begun to change the way they thought about survival. Their homes, their cabins, their traditions, all of them had been tested and found wanting. But here, within the shelter the old man had built, they understood a deeper truth. Survival was not about building quickly or cheaply. It was about building with foresight, with wisdom, with a connection to the land itself. As the days wore on, the old man began to gather the younger ones around him, teaching them the ways of the earth, sharing the stories of their ancestors. He spoke of the seasons, of the cycles of nature, of the ancient wisdom passed down through generations. It was more than just a lesson in survival. It was a reminder of who they were and where they came from. The old man spoke of the snow and the cold, teaching them how to read the signs in the sky, in the wind, and in the earth. He told them of times when their people had survived much worse, when the winters had been longer, the storms fiercer, and yet they had always endured because they had understood the land. It was in this quiet, sacred space that the tribe began to heal. The fear that had gripped their hearts slowly melted away, replaced by a growing sense of trust in the old man, in the land, and in themselves. The storm outside might rage on, but inside they were safe. They were not just surviving, they were learning. They were becoming stronger. As the firelight flickered and cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, the tribe gathered together, their bonds of kinship deepening with each passing moment. They understood now that survival was not just about physical shelter. It was about the strength of the people, the wisdom of the elders, and the lessons that nature itself had to offer. The storm outside could not touch them. They were safe in the snow chamber, hidden from the cold, protected by the very land that had sustained their people for generations. The old man looked around at his tribe, his heart full. The storm had come as a test, but they were passing it, as they always had together. At last, the winds began to quiet, their furious howling dimming to a low whisper. The snow, which had piled deep against the entrances of their cabins, began to settle. The storm had tested them, but the old man's snow chamber had shielded them from its fury. The fire inside burned steady, casting a soft glow over the people who had come to understand the full measure of the shelter's power. It was not just the warmth or the stone walls that had saved them, it was the connection to the land, the ancient knowledge embedded in its very bones. As the sun broke through the clouds on the fifth day, its light illuminating the snow-covered world outside, the old man stood at the entrance of the chamber, looking out over the landscape. The world had changed in those few days, transformed into a frozen expanse. The snow drifted thick across the valley, covering the cabins and making the familiar landscape unrecognizable. It was a scene that might have instilled fear in anyone who had not prepared. But the old man stood unshaken. He had known this moment would come. The tribe slowly emerged from the chamber, one by one, blinking against the harsh light and the biting cold. The snow, now heavy on the ground, had built walls around them, but they were no longer afraid. The storm had come, and it had passed, but they had endured. The cabins outside had not fared as well. The roofs were bowed under the weight of the snow, the doors buried beneath thick drifts, making them impossible to open. Some of the tribe's firewood, stacked high in preparation for the winter, had been swallowed by the snow. It would take weeks to dig out, to rebuild, but they were alive. They were together. As the tribe gathered near the snow chamber, their faces lit with the first warmth they had felt in days, the old man turned to them, his eyes filled with quiet pride. He knew that they had learned a lesson more valuable than any shelter could provide. They had learned that survival was not just about preparing for the expected, it was about understanding the land, listening to its rhythms, and respecting its power. It was about foresight, wisdom, and the strength to endure when all seemed lost. The young ones, once unsure of the shelter's purpose, now understood. The old man had not just built them a refuge, he had given them a gift. He had shown them how to listen to the earth, how to read its signs and understand its ways. They would carry this lesson with them always, passing it down through the generations, just as their ancestors had passed it down to the old man. As the storm finally broke, the tribe stood together, their bond stronger than ever. The world outside was still cold, still harsh, but they knew now that they could face whatever came their way. The legacy of the snow chamber would endure long after the storm had passed. It would be a symbol of survival, of wisdom, and of the sacred connection between the people and the land. And so, as the sun rose high over the snow-covered valley, the old man smiled softly to himself. He had done what he had set out to do, not just to save his people, but to teach them how to save themselves, and in doing so ensure that their legacy would live on.